It was supposed to be a normal night, the kind of night that ended quietly, without anything memorable. But at 11:47 p.m., the restaurant lights were still on. Not because it was busy, not because customers were still coming in, but because Ava was still working. She moved slowly between the empty tables, her body aching with every step. Her hands worked out of habit, wiping surfaces, stacking plates, fixing chairs, repeating motions she had done all day without rest. 17 hours. That's how long she had been on her feet. No real break, no proper meal, just cheap coffee and determination. Because for Ava, stopping wasn't an option. Bills didn't wait, rent didn't care, and life didn't slow down just because you were tired. Around her, the restaurant had already shut down. Chairs were flipped upside down on tables. The floor had been half cleaned, leaving faint streaks under the dim lights. The air still carried the heavy smell of fried food. "Just finish up and go home," her coworker said, already removing her apron. "I'm done." Ava nodded slightly, but she knew the truth. She would be the last one to leave. She always was. She leaned over the final table, scrubbing harder than necessary, trying to push through the exhaustion. Then suddenly, the bell above the door rang. Sharp, unexpected. The sound echoed through the empty restaurant. Ava froze. No one came in this late. Slowly, she turned toward the door, and that's when she saw him. A man stood just inside the entrance, still, quiet, unmoving. For a brief second, it didn't make sense. It felt out of place, like something that didn't belong in that moment. His clothes were worn, not just old, but tired. His jacket hung loosely on his frame, and his shoes were scuffed as if he had walked a long distance to get here. His hair was slightly unkempt. He looked like someone life had pushed too far. From the kitchen, the cook stepped out, already annoyed. "Hey, we're closed." He wiped his hands and glanced at the man. Then his expression changed, hardened. "Yeah, definitely closed," he added. "No service." The man didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't even move. He just stood there, silent, watching. And somehow that silence said more than words ever could. Ava stepped forward before she could think twice. "Wait," she said. Both men looked at her. "It's okay," she continued gently. "I can take one last order." The cook frowned. "Are you serious? Look at him." Ava did look, but this time she looked deeper, past the worn clothes, past the tired appearance. What she saw was hunger, real hunger, the kind you don't fake, the kind that shows in the eyes. "He can sit," she said firmly. The cook shook his head. "You're wasting time." "Then let me waste it," Ava replied quietly. There was a moment of silence. Then the cook threw his towel over his shoulder. "Fine, your problem." He walked back into the kitchen. Ava turned back to the man, her voice softer now. "You can come in." For a second, he didn't move, as if he wasn't sure she meant it. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, each step careful, measured. He chose a seat by the window and sat down quietly, his hands resting on the table. Ava grabbed a menu and walked over, placing it in front of him. "What can I get you?" she asked. The man glanced at the menu, then back at her. "Just something simple," he said. His voice was calm, steady, unexpectedly controlled. Ava nodded, but she didn't write anything down. Instead, she studied him for a brief moment longer. Then she made a decision. A quiet one. A risky one. She walked over to the register and tapped a few buttons. For a moment, her finger hovered over the screen. She hesitated. Then she canceled the order completely. No receipt, no record, nothing. From the kitchen, the cook called out, "What's the order?" "Burger, fries, and soup," Ava replied. "That's not simple," he shouted back. "It is tonight," Ava said. A few minutes later, the food was ready. Hot, fresh, more than he had asked for. Ava carried the tray over and placed it in front of him. The man looked at the food, then at her. "This is too much," he said quietly. Ava shook her head. "It's fine." He looked at her again, longer this time, as if trying to understand something about her. "Thank you," he said. Two simple words, but something about them felt different. He began to eat slowly, carefully, like every bite mattered. Ava turned away and went back to cleaning, trying to act like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Something had changed. She could feel it. And across the room, something else was happening. The office door creaked open. The manager stepped out. At first, he looked tired, ready to leave, until he saw the man, the food, and Ava. His expression shifted. Slowly, his eyes moved toward the corner of the room, toward the security camera. A small red light blinked, recording everything, every action, every decision, every mistake. Ava didn't notice. She kept working, unaware. But by morning, her life was about to change forever. The restaurant felt different after that. Quieter, heavier. Like something unseen had settled into the air, waiting. Ava tried to ignore it. She kept cleaning, kept moving, kept her head down. But she could feel it. Eyes on her. Watching. "Ava." The manager's voice cut through the silence. Sharp, controlled, dangerous. She froze. Slowly, she turned around. He was standing near the office door now, arms crossed, his expression tight. Not tired anymore. Focused. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked. Ava swallowed. He was hungry. I thought." "You thought?" His voice rose slightly. "You thought this was a charity." The words hit harder than she expected. Ava opened her mouth, then closed it again. Behind her, the man continued eating, quietly, like none of this involved him. The manager stepped closer. "You gave away food without paying, without permission." Ava lowered her gaze. "I was going to cover it," she said softly. "With what?" he snapped. "Your tips? Your salary?" He let out a bitter laugh. "You can barely afford to work here." That one stung, because it was true. Ava said nothing. "You don't notice," he continued. "The late shifts, the extra hours, you're desperate." She clenched her hands slightly, not out of anger, but to hold herself together. "I just didn't want to turn him away," she said. "And that's exactly the problem," he replied coldly. "This is a business, not a shelter." Silence fell between them, heavy, uncomfortable. Then he glanced toward the table, toward the man, still eating, still silent. "For all you know," the manager added, lowering his voice, "he could be trouble." Ava shook her head slightly. "He's not." The manager narrowed his eyes. "And you know that. How?" She hesitated, because the truth was, she didn't. But something inside her told her she was right. "I just do," she said quietly. The manager stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "Clean up. We'll deal with this in the morning." Her heart dropped. Morning. That didn't sound like a warning. That sounded like a decision. And decisions like that rarely ended well. He turned and walked back toward his office, stopping only to glance once more at the camera in the corner. The red light was still blinking, still recording. Ava stood there for a moment, her chest tight. Then she forced herself to move again, to finish, to pretend everything was still under control. Behind her, the man finished his meal, slowly, carefully. When Ava returned to collect the tray, he was already standing. "Thank you," he said again. Up close, his voice sounded even calmer, measured, like every word was chosen carefully. Ava gave a small nod. "You're welcome." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he reached into his pocket. Ava instinctively shook her head. "No, it's okay." He paused, then slowly pulled his hand back. "I'll remember this." The words were simple, but something about the way he said them felt different. Not like a promise, not like gratitude, like something else, something deeper. Ava frowned slightly, unsure what he meant, but before she could ask, he turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and just like that, he was gone. The restaurant fell silent again. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something. Ava finished her shift later than usual, much later. By the time she stepped outside, the streets were nearly empty, cold, quiet. Her body ached with every step as she walked home, a small apartment 2 blocks away. Inside, the lights were off, except for one. Ava stepped in quietly, and there, on the couch, was her mother, asleep, blanket barely covering her, a stack of medical bills sitting on the table beside her. Ava's expression softened. She gently adjusted the blanket, making sure she was warm. This was why she couldn't lose her job. Not now, not ever. She glanced at the bills, past due, again. Her chest tightened. 17-hour shifts, and still it wasn't enough. She sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Her mind replayed the night, the man, the food, the manager's voice. Morning. The word echoed in her head. Something was going to happen. She could feel it. And for the first time in a long time, Ava was afraid. Because the next day wasn't just another day. It was a turning point. And somewhere far beyond what she could see, things were already in motion. Because the next morning, someone important was about to walk into that restaurant. The next morning didn't feel normal. From the moment Ava stepped into the restaurant, she knew something was wrong. The air felt tighter, heavier, like everyone was holding their breath. Voices overlapped, chairs scraped loudly against the floor. Footsteps rushed back and forth behind the counter. "What's going on?" Ava asked quietly, setting her bag down. One of the waitresses leaned in, her voice low but urgent. "You didn't hear?" Ava frowned. "Hear what?" "They're coming." A pause. "Who?" "The corporate team," the waitress whispered. "Inspection." Ava's stomach dropped. Inspection? That never happened here. Not at this location. "Why?" she asked. "No idea," the girl replied quickly. "But the manager's freaking out, said everything has to be perfect." Perfect. That word echoed in Ava's mind. Her thoughts immediately jumped back to the night before, to the man, to the food, to the camera. A quiet tension settled in her chest. Across the room, the manager was already barking orders. "Tables wiped again. I don't care if they're clean, wipe them. Menus straight, no fingerprints. Uniforms, fix them." His voice carried a sharp edge of panic, not irritation, not annoyance, fear. Ava had never seen him like this before. She quickly tied her apron, trying to ignore the growing unease in her chest. Something wasn't right. Time moved fast after that. Too fast. Within minutes, the restaurant transformed. Everything looked sharper, cleaner, forced. Even the staff felt different. Smiles were tighter, movements quicker, eyes constantly shifting toward the door, waiting. Ava moved between tables, double-checking everything. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts weren't. Inspection. Her mind kept circling back to it. And then, the door opened. Silence fell instantly, not the quiet of an empty room, but the kind of silence that demanded attention. Everyone turned. 2 men walked in first, dressed in formal suits, serious expressions, clips in hand, corporate. Behind them, another figure stepped inside, and everything changed. At first, Ava didn't recognize him, because this man was nothing like the one from last night. His clothes were sharp, perfectly fitted, dark suit, crisp shirt, polished shoes, his hair neatly styled, every detail precise. But it wasn't just the appearance. It was the way he moved. Calm, controlled, confident. The room shifted around him, as if his presence alone demanded it. Ava felt her breath catch slightly. Something about him felt familiar, but she couldn't place it. The manager rushed forward immediately, his entire demeanor changing. Nervous, polite, almost submissive. "Sir, welcome," he said quickly. "We weren't expecting—" The manager raised his hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to silence him. "We'll begin with observation," he said calmly. His voice. Ava froze. That voice. It was the same. Her heart skipped. No, that wasn't possible. She stared, really stared this time. And then it clicked. The eyes. It was him, the man from last night. But that didn't make sense. Not like this. Not dressed like that. Not walking in like he owns the place. Ava's chest tightened. Across the room, the staff stood straighter, more alert, more careful. The corporate man began taking notes, watching everything, every movement, every detail. And he just observed. His gaze moved slowly across the restaurant, taking everything in. Then it stopped. On her. Ava's breath caught. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Recognition. It was there, clear, undeniable. But his expression didn't change, not even a slightly. No smile, no reaction, nothing. He looked away, and somehow that felt worse. Ava's heart began to race. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. Why was he here? Who was he? And then the answer came. Not from him, but from the manager. Standing straighter now, nervous, sweating. "Everyone," the manager said quickly, his voice tight, "this is Mr. Carter." A pause. "Our owner." The word hit Ava like a shock. Owner. Not just the restaurant, the entire chain. Everything. Her stomach dropped. The room felt like it tilted slightly beneath her feet. The man she chose to serve for free, the man she thought was just a stranger, was the most powerful person in the building, maybe even far beyond it. Ava's mind replayed everything. The food, the canceled order, the camera, the manager's warning. Her chest tightened, because now it all made sense. This wasn't random. This was something else, something bigger. Her hands felt cold. Across the room, Mr. Carter continued walking slowly, observing everything with quiet precision. He stopped near a table, spoke briefly to one of the corporate staff, then moved again, like he was evaluating, judging, deciding. Ava couldn't breathe properly, because now she understood. He hadn't said anything last night. He hadn't reacted, but he had seen everything. And now he was here. Not as a stranger, but as the man who could destroy her career, her job, her stability, everything. Her grip tightened around the tray in her hands, because in that moment, one thought became impossible to ignore. She hadn't just broken the rules, she had broken them in front of the one person who owned them. And as the realization settled in, cold, heavy, unavoidable, Ava understood the truth. The man she chose to help was the same man who could destroy her career. The moment the truth settled in, everything changed. Ava could feel it. In the way the room moved, in the way the staff stood straighter, in the way silence followed him wherever he walked. Mr. Carter, the owner, the man from last night. Her chest tightened, because now every second felt like a countdown. She tried to focus on her work, tried to move normally, but her hands weren't as steady anymore. Her thoughts kept circling back to one thing: the camera. He had seen it, everything. And now he was here, waiting. For what? Ava didn't know, and not uncertainty was worse than anything else. Across the restaurant, the inspection continued. Corporate staff moved from table to table, taking notes, whispering amongst themselves. The manager followed closely behind them, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. but Mr. Carter, he said nothing. He didn't question anyone, didn't interrupt, didn't react. He just watched. His presence alone created pressure, the kind that made people nervous without saying a word. Ava felt it most of all, because every time he passed near her, her heart skipped. Not because he looked at her, but because he didn't. It was deliberate, controlled, like he was waiting. And that made everything worse. Behind her, whispers began to spread, low, sharp, unforgiving. "Isn't she the one? I told you. She's in trouble now." Ava kept her head down, pretending not to hear, but the words still reached her, still settled in her chest like weight. One of the waitresses passed by her, slowing just enough to mutter, "You really messed up this time." Ava said nothing. What was there to say? They weren't wrong. Across the room, the manager suddenly called out, "Ava, come here." Her stomach dropped. This was it. Slowly, she wiped her hands and walked toward him. Every step felt heavier than the last. The entire room seemed to quiet as she approached. The manager turned toward the corporate staff, forcing a polite tone. "There's actually something I'd like to address," he said. Ava's heart pounded. "This employee," he continued, gesturing toward her, "violated company policy last night." Ava's breath caught. He didn't hesitate, didn't soften it, didn't protect her. He exposed her. "In what way?" one of the corporate men asked. The manager straightened. "She gave away food without payment, no authorization, no record." The words echoed louder than they should have. Ava felt every eye in the room shift toward her, judging, waiting. "She compromised the integrity of the business," the manager added quickly. "And frankly, it's not the first time she's shown poor judgment." Ava's head lifted slightly. That wasn't true, but she didn't interrupt, didn't defend herself, because something told her this wasn't about truth. This was about blame, and he was placing all of it on her. "She acted alone," the manager continued. "No one else was involved." Ava's hands tightened at her sides. Of course, he was protecting himself. The camera, the inspection, the pressure. He needed someone to take the fall, and she was the easiest choice. Ava felt her chest tighten, but still she stayed quiet, because deep down she already knew how this ended. Fired, maybe worse. Everything she had worked for, gone. Across from her, the corporate staff exchanged glances, taking notes, observing. And then there was him, Mr. Carter, standing just a few steps away, watching, silent, his expression unreadable. Ava forced herself to look at him just once. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, time slowed. She expected anger, disappointment, judgment, but there was nothing. No reaction, no emotion, just calm. And somehow, that was worse, because she couldn't read him. She couldn't predict what would happen next. The manager cleared his throat. "Of course, we take this very seriously," he said, "and I'm prepared to handle the situation immediately." Ava's breath caught. Immediately. That meant now, right here, in front of everyone. Her heart pounded louder. She braced herself for the words, for the end. But they didn't come. Instead, silence. Mr. Carter didn't respond, didn't interrupt, didn't even acknowledge the accusation. He simply stood there, thinking, observing. The tension stretched, long, uncomfortable. The manager shifted slightly, unsure. "Sir?" he prompted carefully. Still nothing. Every second felt heavier than the last. Ava's chest rose and fell slowly, her mind racing, her future hanging in the balance of a moment she couldn't control. Then finally, Mr. Carter moved. Just a step forward, enough to shift the entire room's attention. He looked at the manager, then at Ava, then briefly around the restaurant, like he was seeing everything.
Not just what was said, but what wasn't. And then he spoke. Calm, controlled, clear. But before the words fully settled, before anyone could even process what was about to happen, the entire room leaned in, because whatever came next would decide everything. And in that moment, Ava realized something. This wasn't just about a free meal anymore. This was something bigger, something she didn't understand yet. And as Mr. Carter finally opened his mouth to speak, one thought echoed through the room. But what he said next shocked everyone.
The silence broke, quietly, but the impact was immediate. Everyone, return to your work. Mr. Carter's voice was calm, controlled, final. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Not gone, but redirected. Staff moved quickly, almost too quickly, eager to escape the moment. The corporate team stepped back. The manager hesitated, clearly expecting more. Punishment, a decision, but it didn't come. Instead, Mr. Carter turned slightly, his eyes settling on Ava. Walk with me. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Ava's heart skipped. This was it. Not public, not loud, but somehow more serious. She nodded slowly and followed him, past the tables, past the watching eyes, past the whispers that hadn't quite faded. The office door closed behind them with a soft click, and just like that, the noise of the restaurant disappeared. Silence. Heavy. Ava stood near the door, unsure where to look, what to say, what to expect. Mr. Carter moved toward the desk, his posture relaxed, controlled. Nothing rushed, nothing uncertain. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply observed her, and that silence felt like part of the test. Ava swallowed, forcing herself to stay still, to stay composed. Finally, he spoke. Why did you do it? No accusation, no anger, just a question. Ava blinked slightly. You knew the rules, he continued. You knew the risk. A pause. So why? The answer should have been simple, careful, safe, but Ava didn't choose that. She took a slow breath, then spoke. Because he was hungry. The words were quiet, but steady. Mr. Carter didn't react. Ava continued. I see people like that every day, she said. People who walk in, hoping someone won't turn them away. She hesitated briefly. And most of the time, they are. The room remained still. I didn't think about the rules, she admitted. I just didn't want to be another person who ignored it. Mr. Carter's gaze didn't shift. You gave away something that wasn't yours, he said. Ava nodded. I know. And you could lose your job because of it. I know. Another pause. Yet you did it anyway. Ava met his eyes now, fully. Yes. There was no hesitation in her voice, no regret, just truth. Mr. Carter studied her carefully, like he was measuring something deeper than her words. And if you had to do it again, he asked. Ava didn't look away. I would. Silence filled the room again, but this time, it felt different. Not heavy, not tense, focused. Mr. Carter walked slowly around the desk. Closer. You're aware this isn't sustainable, he said. Kindness doesn't pay rent. Ava's expression softened slightly. No, she said, but it matters. He stopped in front of her. And what about you? He asked. Who takes care of you? That question caught her off guard. For a moment, she didn't answer, because no one had asked her that before. Not really. Ava exhaled slowly. I manage, she said.
Mr. Carter didn't respond, didn't accept the answer. He waited, and something about that silence made it harder to hide. Ava looked down briefly, then spoke again. "I have my mother at home," she said quietly. "She's sick." The words came slowly now, more real. Medical bills, medication, it doesn't stop. Her voice didn't break, but it came close. "I work as much as I can," she continued, "but it's never enough." Mr. Carter listened, without interruption. "And still," he said, "you gave away food you couldn't afford." Eva nodded. "Yes." Another pause. "But I wasn't thinking about myself," she added. That was the truth. Simple. Unfiltered. Mr. Carter's expression remained calm, but something shifted, subtle, almost unnoticeable. He turned slightly, walking a few steps away, thinking. Ava stood still, her heart steady now. Whatever happened next, she had said what she believed. No excuses, no lies, just truth. Mr. Carter stopped near the window, looking out briefly. Then he turned back. His eyes settled on her again, different now, more certain. And in that moment, Ava realized something. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a test. Her honesty, her choices, her character. Everything had been measured. Everything had been seen. And now came the result. Mr. Carter stepped forward again. "Ava," he said calmly. She straightened slightly. "I believe you." Her breath caught. "But belief alone doesn't change outcomes," he continued. A pause. "And actions have consequences." Her chest tightened again. There it was, the reality. But his tone didn't change, didn't harden. Instead, it stayed calm, measured. And then he said something she wasn't prepared for, something that shifted everything. "I have a proposition for you." Ava blinked. A proposition? Her mind struggled to catch up, because this wasn't what she expected. Not punishment, not dismissal, something else, something unknown. Mr. Carter held her gaze, steady, intentional. And in that moment, the air in the room changed again, because whatever he was about to offer wouldn't just affect her job, it would change her life. And Ava felt it, that quiet shift, that turning point, because the man she helped was no longer testing her. He was deciding something bigger, something she couldn't see yet. And as the weight of his words settled in, one truth became clear. He had made her an offer she never expected.
The room felt still, too still, like everything was waiting for what came next. Ava stood where she was, her thoughts racing, trying to make sense of his words. A proposition. From him. Mr. Carter didn't rush. He never did. "I've been reviewing this location for some time," he said calmly. "Performance, management, staff conduct." Ava listened carefully. Every word felt important now. "And what I saw last night," he continued, "was not just a violation of policy." Her chest tightened slightly. "It was a decision." A pause. A decision most people wouldn't make. Ava didn't respond. She wasn't sure how to. Mr. Carter stepped a little closer. "This place," he said, gesturing slightly, "has potential." Another pause. "But it lacks something important." Ava held her breath. "Leadership," he finished. The word lingered in the air. Ava blinked. Leadership? Her? No, that didn't make sense. "I'm giving you an opportunity," he said. There it was. Clear, direct. Ava's heart began to race again. "Assistant manager," he continued. "Effective immediately." The words hit her like a shock. Assistant manager? Her mind struggled to catch up. Just hours ago, she thought she was going to lose everything. Now, this? I don't understand, she said quietly. You showed judgment, Mr. Carter replied. Not perfect judgment, but real judgment. Ava shook her head slightly. I broke the rules, she said. Yes, he agreed. No denial, no sugarcoating. But you also showed something this place is missing. A pause. Human instinct. The words settled slowly. Ava looked at him, still uncertain. And what makes you think I can do this? She asked. Mr. Carter's expression didn't change. Because you didn't hesitate when it mattered, he said. Silence. Ava felt the weight of the moment pressing against her. This wasn't just an offer. It was a chance, a way out. More money, stability, security for her mother. Everything she had been struggling for. But something inside her resisted. This doesn't make sense, she said again, more firmly now. You don't know me. Mr. Carter held her gaze. I know enough. Ava hesitated. That's not how this works. People don't just get promoted overnight. Most people don't, he replied. Another pause. But you're not most people. The words should have felt reassuring, but instead, they made her uneasy, because nothing in her life had ever come this easily. Nothing without a cost. What's the catch? She asked quietly. Mr. Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back toward the desk, calm, measured. There is no catch, he said. Ava didn't believe that. There was always something. There's responsibility, he added. Expectations, pressure. That she understood, but still, something didn't sit right. I need this job, she admitted, but I don't want charity. The words were honest, careful. Mr. Carter nodded slightly. This isn't charity, he said. A pause. It's an investment. That word lingered. Investment. In her. Ava looked down briefly, her thoughts clashing. Pride, survival. Two forces pulling in opposite directions. She had spent her entire life fighting to stand on her own, not to depend on anyone. But now, this could change everything. Her mother's treatment, the bills, the constant pressure, it could all ease. Ava closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them. Okay, she said quietly. The decision was made, not because it was easy, but because she didn't have a choice. Mr. Carter nodded once. Good, he said. Simple, final. But as the words settled, something else began to shift. Because outside that office, things were already changing. When Ava stepped back onto the floor, the atmosphere felt different again. Eyes turned instantly. Whispers followed. What happened? Why was she in there so long? The manager stood near the counter, his expression tight. And when he heard the news, it got worse. Assistant manager? He repeated, his voice strained. Ava nodded slowly. Silence. Then forced acceptance. Of course, he said quickly, glancing toward the office, if that's the decision. But his eyes said something else. Something colder. Something dangerous. Around them, the staff exchanged looks. Confusion, disbelief, jealousy. She just got here. That doesn't make sense. Why her? Ava felt it immediately. The shift, the distance. Moments ago, she was one of them. Now, she wasn't. And that change wasn't welcome. Across the room, Mr. Carter watched silently, observing everything. The reactions, the tension, the unspoken resistance. Like he expected it. Like it was part of the process. Ava stood still for a moment, trying to steady herself. This was what she wanted. A chance. But it didn't feel simple. It felt complicated, heavy. Because opportunity doesn't just bring change, it brings attention. And not all of it is good. The manager turned away, his jaw tight. One of the waitresses whispered something under her breath. Another avoided eye contact completely. The room felt divided now, and Ava could feel it, that quiet tension building beneath the surface. Because not everyone saw her success as something earned. Some saw it as something taken. And as she stood there, caught between relief and unease, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't over, not even close. Because opportunity always comes with consequences. And in this case, those consequences were already beginning.
because not everyone wanted her to succeed. Not everyone wanted her to win. And as the tension quietly grew around her, one thought echoed clearly. But not everyone wanted her to succeed.
At first, it was subtle, the shift. Not loud, not obvious. But Ava felt it. In the way conversations stopped when she walked in the way eyes lingered a second too long, in the silence that followed her presence. Things had changed, and not in her favor. Her new position came with responsibility, schedules, inventory, staff coordination, work she threw herself into completely. She arrived earlier, left later, double-checked everything, because she knew one thing: she couldn't afford to fail. Not now, not after everything. But effort didn't erase resentment, and resentment was growing. The manager still smiled when Mr. Carter was around, nodded, agreed, but when he wasn't, that smile vanished, replaced by something colder. "Make sure you don't mess this up," he muttered one afternoon. Ava didn't respond. Not everything needed an answer. Still, the whispers didn't stop. "She doesn't deserve it. She got lucky. This won't last." Ava ignored them, focused on her work. But tension like that doesn't disappear. It builds, and eventually it breaks. It happened 3 days later. A packed shift, orders stacking up, controlled chaos. Ava moved quickly behind a counter, checking tickets, coordinating with the kitchen. Everything had to run smoothly because Mr. Carter was expected again. Another inspection, another evaluation. Pressure filled the room. Then, "Where's the payment record for table 6? The manager's voice cut through everything. Sharp, accusing. Ava turned. "What?" He held up a receipt, or rather, the lock of one. "There's no record. Food was served, no payment logged." Ava frowned. "That's not possible." But something felt wrong. The manager stepped closer, voice rising just enough to draw attention. "This is exactly what I warned about. Careless decisions." Ava's chest tightened. "I didn't authorize anything." But doubt had already spread. Staff exchanged glances. "It's happening again. She's doing the same thing." Ava shook her head. "This isn't me." "Check the system," the manager snapped. She rushed to the register, fingers moving fast, searching, checking. Nothing. No record. Her heart began to race. That didn't make sense. She hadn't done this. She knew she hadn't. But the evidence said otherwise. The manager crossed his arms, satisfied. Same pattern, giving away food again. "That's not true," Ava said, her voice tightening. "Then explain it." She couldn't, because she didn't understand it herself. And in that moment, truth didn't matter, only what could be proven. And right now, everything pointed at her. The room felt smaller, heavier. Ava looked around. No one spoke. No one defended her. "Everyone saw it, right?" the manager pressed. Silence. Then a hesitant nod from one waitress. Ava's heart dropped. It wasn't true, but fear made people agree with anything. "She's been making mistakes since her promotion," the manager continued. Ava clenched her hands. This wasn't a mistake. It was something else, something intentional. Before she could speak, the door opened and everything stopped. Mr. Carter stepped inside. The timing felt too precise. Silence fell instantly. "Sir," the manager said quickly, "there's been another incident." Another. The word echoed. "She's done it again. Unauthorized service, no payment." Ava turned toward Mr. Carter. This was it. Her chance, her stability, her future, all about to collapse. She expected disappointment, judgment, anger, because this looked bad, really bad. But Mr. Carter said nothing. He simply looked at her.
calm, unreadable. Then he turned to the register. "Show me." The manager stepped aside. Ava watched as Mr. Carter reviewed the system, every detail, slowly, carefully. The room held its breath. Ava's heart pounded. She knew the truth, but truth didn't always win here. Not like this. Seconds stretched. Then he looked up. Not at the manager, at Ava. And something shifted. His expression wasn't doubt. It wasn't disappointment. It was certainty. Then he spoke. "To the system logs." The manager frowned. "What?" "Access logs," Callie clarified. "Pull them up." A pause. Tension filled the air. But the manager obeyed. Ava watched, breath shallow now, because suddenly this didn't feel right. The logs appeared. Mr. Carter studied them, carefully. Then a small pause, and everything changed. The truth surfaced, quiet, clear, undeniable. Ava saw it in his eyes. He knew. This wasn't her. She hadn't made the mistake. She had been set up. And as that realization settled, everything shifted. This wasn't misunderstanding anymore. It was betrayal, calculated, intentional. Ava felt her chest tighten, because trust had just been broken, completely. Across from her, Mr. Carter straightened, still calm, but now decisive, because this time he had seen enough, and one thing became clear. He was not going to stay silent.
The room felt frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Every eye was fixed on the screen and on Mr. Carter, because something had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. He straightened slowly, his gaze calm but sharper now, focused, certain. And when he finally spoke, his voice cut through the silence with quiet authority. "Who accessed the system at 2:13 p.m.? The question hung in the air. No one answered. The manager shifted slightly. I'm not sure what you mean, sir." Mr. Carter didn't look at him. Not yet. "The system logs show a manual override, order deletion, no authorization code from Ava." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Staff exchanged glances. Whispers returned, but this time different. What? That means... Ava's heart pounded, because now the truth was coming out. Slowly, but clearly. Mr. Carter turned his head, finally, toward the manager. "And that override," he added calmly, "was done from this terminal." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. The manager's face changed. Just slightly, but enough. "That's not possible," he said quickly. "There must be a mistake." Mr. Carter held his gaze, unmoved. "There isn't." 2 words. Cold. Final. The room shifted again. This time there was no confusion, only realization. Because now everyone understood. This wasn't Ava's mistake. It was a setup, a calculated one. Ava felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but something else. Relief, and something deeper. Betrayal. Because she had trusted the system, the job, the people around her, and someone had used that against her. The manager took a step back, his voice losing its confidence. "Sir, I would never—" Enough. Mr. Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The authority in that single word was enough to silence the entire room. "I've reviewed enough," he said. A pause. "And I've seen enough." The manager's composure broke slightly now. Panic flickered across his face. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "I was trying to protect the business. By falsifying records?" Silence. No answer. Because there wasn't one. Mr. Carter stepped forward slightly, his presence filling the space. "You created a problem and attempted to assign it to someone else." Another pause.
An employee who has shown more integrity in one decision than you have in your entire position. The words landed heavily. Ava felt it. Everyone did. Because this wasn't just about the mistake anymore. It was about truth and who stood on the right side of it. The manager lowered his gaze, unable to respond. And just like that, it was over for him. Effective immediately, Mr. Carter said, you are no longer employed here. A sharp inhale moved through the room. No argument, no second chance, just a decision. Final. The manager stood frozen for a moment. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away. And just like that, the tension broke. But not completely, because now all attention shifted back to Ava. She stood where she was, still trying to process everything. The accusation, the betrayal, the truth. And now, this. Mr. Carter turned toward her. His expression calmer again, but not distant. Different. You handled yourself well, he said. Ava blinked slightly. I didn't do anything, she replied quietly. You didn't need to, he said. A pause. You stayed honest. The words settled deeply, because in the end, that was what mattered. Not perfection, not rules, but integrity. Mr. Carter looked around the room briefly, at the staff, at the silence, then back at Ava. This location needs leadership, he said. Ava's breath caught slightly. And it needs someone people can trust. Another pause. Starting today, you'll take over as acting manager. The words echoed through the room. Acting manager. Higher than before, more responsibility, more power. Ava's mind struggled to keep up. This isn't just a promotion, he added. It's a position you'll grow into. She swallowed softly. Are you sure? She asked. Mr. Carter gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I don't make uncertain decisions. Silence followed, but this time it felt different, lighter. The tension that once filled the room had shifted into something else. Respect, understanding, and maybe a little bit of admiration. Ava looked around. The same people, the same place, but everything had changed. Not because she fought, not because she proved anything, but because she stayed true to who she was, even when it cost her. Mr. Carter turned slightly, preparing to leave, but before he did, he paused and glanced back at her. For a brief moment, their eyes met again. This time, there was no distance, no mystery, just quiet acknowledgement, and something else, subtle, unspoken, respect. Then he walked away, and just like that, the moment passed, but the impact remained. Ava stood there, taking it all in. The noise slowly returning, the restaurant coming back to life. But now, it was different, because she was different, stronger, seen, chosen. And as the weight of everything settled in, one truth stood above the rest. Not the promotion, not the reward, but the reason behind it. Because in the end, everything changed for one simple reason. All because she chose kindness when no one else did. Thank you for watching till the end. Hope you enjoyed the story. Like, share, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more interesting stories. See you in our next story.